1 Samuel chapter 15 through 34 through chapter 16, verse 13. Then Samuel went to Ramah, and Saul went up to his house in Gibeah of Saul. And Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death. But Samuel grieved over Saul, and the Lord was sorry that he had made Saul king over Israel. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you grieve over Saul? I have rejected him from being king over Israel. Fill your horn with oil and set out. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons." Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me." And the Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me the one whom I name to you." Samuel did what the Lord commanded and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him trembling and said, "Do you come peaceably?" He said, "Peaceably. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they came, he looked on Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointing is now before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. He said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, and Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." Samuel said to Jesse, "Are all your sons here?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, but he's keeping the sheep." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him, for we will not sit down until he comes." And so he sent and brought him, and now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. And the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. Samuel then sent out and went to Ramah. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Strange news, maybe even unwelcome news, and we say, what? Change is coming. We're going to enter some sort of transition. There's no avoiding it. And we say, why? Why? Often the change that comes, the transition we enter, involves a third question, though. Who? Who? Who is going to lead us now? Who will do what the folks who aren't with us anymore used to do? Who is going to get us through this time of not having the answers to those first 2 questions? What? Which indicates our shock, but also a desire to learn more. In times of transition, this season of what can be a season of learning. Why expresses our own sense of hurt and loss and maybe a bit of anger about what's going on. And the season of why can be a season of bargaining or demand for a different future, or it can point us to sources of healing and exponential growth. Who has an indication of anxiety? There's no question change is coming. So the why questions have been asked, and perhaps our numbers have diminished, and they've been diminishing further by those who have been culled or who have culled themselves from our ranks. And while these raises some anxiety about how things will get done, and we'll talk about the how next week, the pressing question it tends to raise is who will do it now? Who will do it now? Me? Her? Him? They? Me? Who will do it now? It's a lot of uncertainty. That's a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty breeds anxiety. And anxiety tends to generate a sort of a tunnel vision, if you will, in people charged with finding new leaders or a new way forward. Focus, hyper-focus. Now, tunnel vision isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing. There's another name for tunnel vision in sports, and it's called being in the zone. Being in the zone, or being in a flow state. If one gets into the zone on the basketball court or on the baseball diamond, and you can have 3 straight 3-point shots, or you might even pitch a perfect game. Or if you ask Shaun White about those back-to-back 1440s in his third run on the halfpipe at Pyeongchang when he got a gold medal, I bet he'll tell you he was in the zone. Anxiety plus their discipline skills can get premier athletes into a heightened state of awareness where they can focus and perform what looks like miracles with what seems like the greatest of ease. It seems so easy. But if we're in a season of who, and we get into tunnel vision around that, the results can be far from gold medal worthy. In this week's reading, we find Samuel in a position where he has every reason to be asking who questions. Saul, the current king, has failed and not doing great. So he's asking who's next? Who's next? The king the people asked for and whom he had anointed has turned out to be even worse than Samuel had warned a king might be. He is enriching himself with money, losing battles, usurping the priesthood, and as it turns out, is prone to alternating fits of depression and rage. Saul is a disastrous king. It's not good. There was no way to get rid of him. He was the king, and it was not a democracy. Well, there was one way: insurrection. Rivals to the throne. You could become a rival and risk splitting up the nation that had just been united around Saul. Then you get to deal with the violence and the aftermath of all that. Not maybe a place you want to step into as king. So it wasn't just that Saul's failings were demoralizing, they were destabilizing, they were dangerous, and everybody knew it. So anxieties ran high. There were literal eggshells that people were trying to walk across. It was tough. Hard place to live in. There was nothing the people could do that wouldn't make things worse. But there was something God could do. And so there was something that also Samuel could do. In ancient Israel, it was understood, at least by some, that it was God who provided the king. God could make a king, just as God had raised up judges and prophets, and if needed, God could make another king. The new one couldn't rule while the first one was alive, but the process of identifying this new king could begin at any time. God was done with Saul because Saul had proven himself to be done with really any allegiance to God at all. And it was time to identify the next king. And so it was time for Samuel to get out his horn filled with oil for anointing and go anoint the one God would identify, one of the sons of Jesse in Bethlehem. It's a season of anxiety. Samuel can't go anointing the next king all willy-nilly, and so Madman Saul would have him killed in the instant he heard of it if he did this. See you, Saul, I'm going to go anoint the next king. No, you're not. A season of anxiety, a season of who, we tend to become really clear about what we can't do. It's very obvious we can't do this, or it's going to be worse. And sometimes, because of that, we easily lose sight of what we can reason we focus on the can't instead of the can. So yes, Samuel couldn't travel from Ramah to Bethlehem and announce, I'm here to anoint the one of Jesse's sons as king. But that didn't mean he couldn't do the anointing. He didn't know that, but God did. God reminded Samuel of something Samuel seemed to have forgotten. He wasn't just a judge and a prophet who could anoint kings, but he was also a priest who could offer sacrifices. He could take a sacrifice and his priestly gear with him and offer a sacrifice to which he would invite Jesse and sons. Sometimes in the season of who, we find ourselves asking, who? Me? You mean me? We forget our own gifts that make us perfect candidates for what is needed in such a time as this. We forget about the gifts that God has given us that make us perfect candidates for such a time as this. But God does not. God doesn't forget who you are. God doesn't forget who you were created to be. God does not forget now, and God did not forget then. And so Samuel went. It wasn't wrong to be anxious. Having a former judge of all Israel on the move in this anxious season could send all sorts of anxiety-raising signals all by itself, all through the country. Having that ex-judge arrive at your city gates to do something there, and it might not be good. The elders of the city saw him on the road, and in their own panic, they were even trembling in verse 4. They asked whether he were coming to their town with peaceful intent. Seriously, they do have reason to worry if he were not. If he were going to organize an army of Bethlehemites against Saul, not an inconceivable thought in those times, and Saul heard of that, Saul would have every person and everything in that town obliterated. They could not risk that. Anxious times, the season of who. Samuel was admitted, probably escorted to the sacrificial site, then sent out word for Jesse and his sons to meet him there. He would get everything ready to offer a sacrifice there, but he would not offer it until he had anointed the next king. And Samuel didn't know whom he would anoint. He only knew it was going to be one of Jesse's sons. That pairing of knowledge, one of the sons of Jesse, the one God would designate personally. In that pairing of knowledge and ignorance of which son it would be may have been the key God used to prevent Samuel from falling prey to tunnel vision that would prevent him from seeing God's choice. The very first one, Eliab, appeared to be right out of casting central for the part. Tall, dark, and handsome. And the oldest son. Fit to be king. But Samuel heard God tell him, not this one. Look at the heart. Then not the next one or the next one or the next until all the sons present were rejected. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in an anxious state and I've got 6 puzzle pieces in front of me and none of them fits the spot, I assume I've missed something and try going back over the 6 pieces that I have. I start looking for ways to make one of the puzzle pieces work. I don't think right away that there must be a missing puzzle piece. No, I look at all the corners and the curves and the edges and I try to figure out that I just maybe not turn it in the right direction. And then sometimes it almost quite fits and I try to pound it in there to make it fit. And it still doesn't quite work. So here we have this time where we're anxious and we're trying to figure out. Samuel says, God, you sent me here to anoint someone, but for some reason everyone that's been put before me is not the person that we're looking for. Samuel shows us the way forward in this anxious season of who. And in the process, we learn just how anxiety had affected everyone in the system. So we ask the question, are all your sons here? Maybe an obvious question. Samuel would have every reason to presume that when there's a sacrifice the whole family is called to, well, the whole family would be there. Are all your sons here? But no, Jesse was anxious too. He was anxious, well, about his flocks. You can't leave them unattended. He was anxious about this quick compliance with the strange order, so he didn't bother to try and invite his youngest son, David, who was tending the sheep, because surely it could not be him. David was then summoned, though, and God said he was the one, and Samuel anointed him. In the season of who, we find ourselves in times of transition. We get anxious. We try to force fit things. And in all of that, we risk missing whom God may be providing for us in such a time as this. Friends, I know within this congregation, we've been in a season of who for a while. Who will pick up where they left off? Who will run this program now? Who? We may not be able to let go of all the anxiety. I understand that. Maybe we can interrupt it long enough to breathe and to seek God's voice and to seek the Spirit's leading. It's there. And often there. It's the voice reminding us to ask a question we may not have thought to ask in our anxiety-driven tunnel vision. Is everyone here? Who's not yet at the table? What kind of face have we not seen? What kind of voice haven't we heard? What kind of disabilities haven't we considered? What kind of abilities haven't we considered? The who is a hard question. I know personally in my own life right now, as my family and I are transitioning ourselves, we're moving. It's an odd place to be. And if you ask me how I'm doing, I'll probably tell you that. It's an odd place to be. To be both fully invested in Lincoln and at Hickory Chapel, and also being pulled away is an odd place to be. It's also, more personally, with my own family, a difficult place to be, because while we will be moving closer to some family, I will also be leaving my parents behind. And my father, who has suffered a stroke, and my mother need help. And so 3.5 hours from them is difficult. And so in my own situation, I'm thinking, who will help them when I'm gone? Who will be the one? And I know that in your own lives as well, and you've had moments where loved ones have died, or something has happened within your personal life, work, or school, or whatever it might be, and you wonder, who will fill that void? Who will pick up the reins? Who will step up and be a leader? Who? And I've heard it asked within the church as well. Who will lead us? Well, friends, one of the great things about being in the United Methodist Church is we have the itinerancy program. And so when I leave, Renee will just pick up right where we are and keep going. I have full confidence in Renee. And I know, and it's so nice to know this, that she will come here and she will love you. She'll love you. And I hope and pray that you'll love her and her family as well. And it's helpful to know that someone will come after me and will love you. And so who is the question? We know who the next pastor will be. But my question for all of us out here is, God speaking to you? Is God saying, I need you to come alongside Renee and her family and be in ministry? I need you to pray for them. I need you to show them around town. I need you to introduce them to people at school. It's God calling you. May we trust the one who knows us better than we know ourselves to lead us to those who don't yet know. And maybe find among them the answer to our who. Amen. I want to spend this time after the